I am Jessica, 32 years old, and I have spent my entire life being the responsible one. I worked hard through school, put myself through college, and built a stable career, while my younger sister Amber floated from one passion to another. Our parents always favored her, but nothing prepared me for that Sunday dinner when they slid mortgage papers across the table. "We have decided you should be the one to pay for this mortgage," my father announced. They had bought my sister a house and expected me to pay for it. When I refused, they actually sued me for $480,000. The judge's reaction to their evidence changed everything. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to family members who crossed the line. This story might give you the courage to set boundaries you never thought possible. I grew up in a comfortable suburb of Boston, in a neighborhood where all the houses looked similar, but everyone knew which families had money and which ones were just getting by. We fell somewhere in the middle. My father Harold worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, and my mother Margaret taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We never struggled, but my parents were careful with money tracking expenses in a detailed ledger that sat prominently on the kitchen counter. At least they were careful with money when it came to me. My sister Amber, younger by 4 years, seemed to operate under a different set of rules entirely. The pattern started early. On my 10th birthday, I received practical gifts, new winter boots, a scientific calculator for school, and a $20 gift card to the bookstore. 2 months later, when Amber turned 6, she got a lavish party at the indoor water park, complete with professional face painters and a custom cake that must have cost at least $100. When I mentioned the disparity, my mother brushed it off. "Amber is more social than you, Jessica. She needs these experiences." This became the justification for everything. Amber needed dance lessons because she was artistic. Amber needed a new computer because she was interested in graphic design this month. Amber needed a trip to New York to see Broadway shows because it would fuel her creative spirit. Meanwhile, I excelled academically through sheer determination. I joined every free club at school, became editor of the school newspaper, and graduated valedictorian. My parents attended my graduation but left immediately after my speech to attend Amber's community theater performance. You understand, right, Jess? You know how nervous she gets before shows. I did understand, or at least, I convinced myself I did. I buried my hurt beneath layers of rationalization and responsibility. College was where the disparity became impossible to ignore. Despite my excellent grades and test scores, my parents informed me they had limited college savings. "We always taught you to be independent," my father explained. "You will appreciate your education more if you have skin in the game." I cobbled together scholarships, loans, and worked 20 hours a week at the campus library to afford Boston University. Every semester was a financial struggle. Meanwhile, Amber was fully funded at Berklee College of Music, only to drop out after 3 semesters because the program was stifling her creativity. She then attended Rhode Island School of Design with fresh tuition payments from our parents, before leaving after a year to find herself. Her 3rd attempt at college was at Emerson, which lasted almost 2 years before she decided she was an entrepreneur, not a student. Through all this, I remained determined to succeed on my own. After graduating with honors in finance, I secured an entry-level position at a financial consulting firm. I worked 60-hour weeks, earned promotions, and slowly built a respectable career. By 32, I had become a project manager with a team under me, and a reputation for solving complex problems. Meanwhile, Amber at 28 had cycled through a pottery business funded by our parents, a jewelry-making venture, bankrolled by a small loan from Dad, and most recently, a plan to open a yoga studio that mysteriously never required her to get certified as an instructor. Through it all, she lived in a beautiful apartment in Cambridge, her rent paid by our parents, so she could focus on building her dreams. I lived in a studio apartment that I had saved for years to afford. It was small, but mine, paid for with my own money. Every piece of furniture, every bill, every vacation day came from my own efforts. This should have been a source of pride, and it was, but it was tinged with the bitter knowledge that my sister would never understand the satisfaction of true self-sufficiency. Despite everything, I maintained a relationship with my family. Weekly phone calls with my mother, monthly dinners with all of them. I showed up at holidays with thoughtful gifts and deflected questions about when I would settle down. I even tried occasionally to address the favoritism directly. "Mom, do you notice how you and Dad support Amber differently than me?" I asked once over coffee. "Oh, Jessica," she replied with a dismissive wave. "You have always been so independent and capable. Amber is sensitive. She needs more support. You should be proud that you do not need our help." I tried discussing it with my therapist, Dr. Wilson, who helped me understand that the dynamic was unlikely to change. "Your parents have cast you in the role of the self-sufficient one," she explained. "It fulfills something in them to have one child who needs them and one who does not. The question is, can you accept the relationship as it is with clear boundaries, or do you need to create more distance?" I chose boundaries, but continued the relationship. Part of me still craved their approval, still hoped that one day they would see me, really see me, and acknowledge my efforts and accomplishments. Things shifted slightly when I got engaged to Michael 2 years ago. He came from a family where support was distributed equally among siblings, and he was shocked by the disparity in how my parents treated Amber and me. He was the first person who did not try to justify their behavior or encourage me to be the bigger person. "It is not right, Jess," he would say after family gatherings. "The way they fawn over her and barely acknowledge your promotion, your engagement, anything about your life. You deserve better." His perspective was refreshing, but also painful. Having someone validate my feelings made it harder to maintain the careful, emotional balance I had constructed over decades. The situation came to a head 3 months ago, when Amber announced at a family dinner that she was ready to settle down. At 28, with no stable job history, and a string of 3-month relationships behind her, this declaration was met with enthusiasm from our parents. "That is wonderful, sweetheart," my mother gushed. "We have always said you would find your path when you were ready." I noticed my father looking thoughtful, making mental calculations. At the time, I thought he was considering the cost of an eventual wedding. I had no idea what they were actually planning. The invitation to Sunday dinner came via text from my mother. "Family dinner, this Sunday at 6. Important matters to discuss. Please be on time." I assumed the important matters involved my upcoming wedding to Michael. We had been in the midst of venue hunting, and I thought perhaps my parents wanted to offer input, or maybe in a surprising turn financial assistance. After all, they had mentioned several times how they had always imagined Amber getting married at the Danvers Country Club where they were members. Perhaps they were finally seeing that I deserved similar consideration. Michael could not attend, due to a work commitment, which, in retrospect, was fortunate. I arrived at exactly 6, bearing a bottle of my father's favorite scotch as a goodwill gesture. The initial atmosphere was suspiciously warm. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, beef Wellington, which she normally reserved for special occasions. My father poured me a glass of expensive Cabernet without his usual comment about the cost. Even Amber seemed unusually interested in my life, asking questions about work and the wedding plans. "The hydrangea centerpieces you mentioned would be beautiful," she said, referring to a detail I had mentioned months ago, and was surprised she remembered. "Blue has always been your color." The meal progressed pleasantly, and I found myself relaxing, daring to hope that something had shifted in our family dynamic. Perhaps my engagement had made them reevaluate how they treated me. Perhaps they were finally seeing me as an adult, worthy of the same consideration they gave Amber. As my mother cleared the dinner plates and brought out coffee and dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Jessica, we have some exciting news to share." My mother beamed as she returned to the table. "We have been working on a surprise, and we are just thrilled to finally tell you about it. We have purchased a house for Amber," my father announced, his voice brimming with pride. "It is a beautiful colonial in Lexington, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths with a gorgeous yard. Perfect for when she starts a family. I blinked, trying to process this information. That is, a big step, I managed to say. Congratulations, Amber. I turned to my sister, who was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. Wait until you see it, Jess. It has this amazing kitchen with a wine fridge and one of those fancy farmhouse sinks. And the master bathroom has a soaking tub that is to die for. My mother pulled out her phone and began showing me photos of an undeniably beautiful home. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a backyard with a built-in fire pit. It looked like something from a magazine. It must have cost a fortune, I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Even in my parents' comfortable financial situation, this seemed extravagant. $650,000, my father said casually. We got a good deal because the previous owners were divorcing and motivated to sell. We put down 20% to avoid PMI. I did the mental math, a $130,000 down payment just handed to Amber. Meanwhile, Michael and I had been saving for 3 years for a modest down payment on a condo, carefully tracking every expense, skipping vacations, taking on extra work projects. Before I could fully process this, my father reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder which he slid across the table to me. This is where you come in, Jessica. Confused, I opened the folder to find mortgage documents for Amber's new house. My confusion deepened as I flipped through the papers. We have decided, my father continued, his tone matter of fact, that you should be the one to pay for this mortgage as your contribution to the family. The room seemed to tilt slightly as his words registered. I am sorry, what? It makes perfect sense, my mother jumped in. You are the one with the stable job and good credit. Amber is just getting started in life and needs security. The payments are only $2,800 a month for 30 years. With your salary at the consulting firm, that should be manageable. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh and reveal it was an elaborate joke. No one did. Instead, Amber leaned forward, eyes bright with excitement. I am already planning how to renovate the guest bedroom into a home yoga studio, she said. And once that is set up, I can finally launch my wellness coaching business properly. The full reality of what they were proposing hit me. My parents had purchased a luxury home for my sister and expected me to pay for it for the next 30 years. A total financial commitment of over $480,000. This is not reasonable, I said, finally, my voice surprisingly steady despite the anger building inside me. I cannot and will not take on a mortgage for a house I will not live in. My father's expression darkened. We thought you would be more supportive. This is for your sister's future. What about my future? I asked. Michael and I are saving for our own home. We are planning a wedding. Eventually, we will want to start a family. How could I possibly commit to paying Amber's mortgage on top of all that? You have always been selfish, my mother said, her previous warmth evaporating instantly. After everything we have done for you, you cannot do this one thing for your sister. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Everything you have done for me, I put myself through college. I built my career without help. I saved for my own apartment while you paid Amber's rent for years. What exactly have you done for me that compares to buying my sister a $650,000 house? Amber's eyes filled with tears. I knew you would ruin this. You have always been jealous of me. Jealous, I repeated incredulously. I have spent my entire life working for everything I have while watching you receive endless handouts. And now, I am being asked to fund your lifestyle for the next 30 years. This is insane. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. This is not a request, Jessica. This is a family decision that has already been made. The preliminary paperwork has been filed. You need to sign these documents by Friday. I stood as well, gathering my purse. That is not happening. I will not sign anything. This is not my responsibility. You have always been difficult, my mother said, her voice cold, always making everything harder than it needs to be. Why can you not just help your family without making a scene? This is not helping, I replied, my voice shaking now. This is financial abuse. I am leaving now, and I am not signing those papers, ever. As I walked to the door, Amber called after me. If you really loved me, you would want me to have a nice home. I turned back one last time. If you really respected me, you would not expect me to pay for it. I made it to my car before the tears started. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I called Michael as soon as I was on the road, the words tumbling out between sobs as I explained what had happened. Pull over, he instructed, his voice tight with anger. I will come get you. You are too upset to drive safely. He met me in a grocery store parking lot, halfway between my parents' house and our apartment. As soon as I saw him, the full weight of what had happened hit me, and I collapsed into his arms. They really expected me to pay for her house, I said, still unable to believe it, like it was the most normal request in the world. This is beyond favoritism, Michael said, as he drove us home. This is delusional. The next week brought a barrage of calls, texts, and emails from my family. My father left voicemails about family duty and how disappointed he was in my selfish attitude. My mother sent guilt-laden texts about how I was breaking Amber's heart. Amber herself vacillated between tearful pleas and angry accusations. Relatives I rarely spoke to began calling, evidently recruited to pressure me. My Uncle Rick suggested I think of it as an investment in family harmony. My cousin Stephanie reminded me that family has to stick together. Only my Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister, called to say she thought the whole situation was inappropriate and to check if I was okay. Through it all, I maintained my position. I would not be paying for Amber's mortgage. Period. A week after the disastrous dinner, I met my friend Diane for lunch. Diane was an attorney specializing in family law, and while I did not want to take legal action against my own parents, I needed to understand where I stood. Let me get this straight, Diane said after I explained the situation. They bought a house for your sister, put down a substantial down payment, and now expect you to take on the mortgage payments for the next 30 years. Yes, I confirmed. My father seems to think this is a reasonable, family contribution on my part. Diane shook her head in disbelief. Do you have any legal obligation here? Did you sign anything even preliminarily? Absolutely not, I assured her. I never agreed to this verbally, or in writing. Then legally you are in the clear, she said. They cannot force you to take on a mortgage without your consent. But, she hesitated, the family pressure might continue. You should prepare for that. Her prediction proved accurate. The very next day, I received a formal letter from an attorney representing my parents. The language was full of legal jargon, but the message was clear. I needed to honor my commitment to pay the mortgage on Amber's house. What commitment? I said aloud, in my empty apartment. I never agreed to this. I called my parents immediately. You hired a lawyer? Seriously? You left us no choice, my father replied coldly. You made a commitment to this family, and we expect you to honor it. I never made any commitment, I insisted. I never agreed to pay Amber's mortgage. Not once. There was a pause before he responded. The paperwork has already been filed with your information. Everything is set up. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean, my information? What paperwork? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. The preliminary mortgage application. It needed to be submitted, while the sellers considered our offer. Did you use my financial information without my consent? I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. We did what was necessary for the family, he replied, not directly answering my question. I contacted the mortgage company immediately and discovered the horrifying truth: preliminary paperwork had indeed been filed with my name, social security number, employment information, and what appeared to be my signature, a signature I had never provided. My own parents had committed forgery and identity theft. I was simultaneously heartbroken and furious. The people who should have protected me had instead violated my trust in the most fundamental way. I made an appointment with Samuel Carter, an attorney specializing in fraud cases, and brought copies of the mortgage documents showing the forged signature. "This is a serious offense," Samuel told me, after examining the documents. "Forgery and identity theft are felonies. Your parents could face criminal charges." "I do not want to press criminal charges against my own parents," I said, feeling sick at the thought. "I just want them to stop trying to force this mortgage on me." "We can start with a cease and desist letter," Samuel suggested. "Make it clear that you are aware of the forgery, that you never consented to any mortgage arrangement, and that any further attempts to involve you will result in legal action." The letter was sent the following day. My parents' response was not to back down but to escalate. My father showed up at my workplace, causing a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. My mother called my boss's office line claiming a family emergency that required me to fulfill my obligations immediately. Meanwhile, Amber launched what could only be described as a social media smear campaign. Posts about toxic family members who abandon you when you need them most, and vague references to being betrayed by someone I trusted appeared daily. She never named me directly, but everyone in our social circle knew exactly who she meant. Extended family members took sides with the majority supporting my parents and Amber. At family gatherings, I was no longer invited to the narrative. Apparently became that I had promised to help Amber buy a house, and then cruelly backed out, leaving her homeless, despite the fact that she was still living in her fully funded apartment. Only Aunt Rebecca remained firmly in my corner. "Your parents have always favored Amber," she told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. "But this crosses every line. Harold has lost his mind if he thinks this is acceptable behavior." The situation took an enormous toll on my mental health and relationship. Wedding planning stalled as Michael and I dealt with the constant stress of my family's harassment. Venues we had tentatively selected suddenly became unavailable after my mother called them, claiming to want to contribute, but actually sabotaging our plans. I tried to maintain my professional composure at work, but it became increasingly difficult. My boss, Jennifer, noticed my distraction and called me into her office. "Jessica, your work has always been exceptional," she said kindly. "But I can see something is wrong. Is there anything I can do to help?" I broke down and explained the situation. To my surprise, Jennifer was extraordinarily supportive. "Take whatever time you need," she said. "Family legal issues are covered under our personal leave policy. Your job will be waiting when you are ready to return." The situation reached its breaking point on a Tuesday morning when I was served with actual lawsuit papers at my office. In full view of my colleagues and clients, a process server handed me documents indicating that my parents were suing me for the full amount of Amber's mortgage, $480,000, plus an additional $50,000 for emotional distress caused by my breach of family contract. I took the medical leave Jennifer had offered, unable to function under the weight of this betrayal. Michael moved temporarily into my small apartment to provide support, his anger at my family growing with each development. "We need to countersue," he insisted after reading the lawsuit documents. "What they are doing is not just wrong, it is criminal." Samuel agreed. "Their case has no legal merit," he assured me. "There was no contract, verbal or written, that would hold up in court. But their actions, particularly the forgery, are actionable. A countersuit would send a clear message that you will not be intimidated." After much soul-searching, I agreed to countersue for forgery, identity theft, harassment, and emotional distress. As Samuel prepared the countersuit, I gathered evidence of the lifelong pattern of favoritism, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. Bank statements, showing my college loans alongside checks written to Amber's schools. Text messages from my parents dismissing my accomplishments while celebrating Amber's minor efforts. The forged mortgage documents that represented the ultimate betrayal. The process was painful but clarifying. For the first time, I saw the full picture of how my family had treated me, not as isolated incidents, but as a deliberate pattern of inequality and exploitation. This was not about one mortgage or one house. This was about a lifetime of being valued, less expected to give more, and punished for any resistance. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early April. I took extra care with my appearance, choosing a conservative navy suit and minimal jewelry. Samuel had advised me to project calm professionalism, despite the emotional nature of the case. Walking into the courthouse, my stomach churned with anxiety. This was never how I had imagined opposing my parents in a legal battle with attorneys and judges instead of a family discussion. Yet here we were, their choices having brought us to this point. I saw them as we entered the courtroom. My father in his best suit expression, stern and unyielding. My mother beside him, dabbing at her eyes, with a tissue for maximum sympathy effect. Amber sitting behind them, playing the role of the victimized sister to perfection, in a modest dress I had never seen her wear before. None of them made eye contact with me as I took my seat beside Samuel. The coldness hurt more than I expected, despite everything that had happened. Judge Andrea Morrison, a formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes, called the court to order. My parents' attorney, a slick man named Philip Donovan, presented their case first. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of a family agreement gone wrong," he began. Harold and Margaret Wilson generously provided a home for their younger daughter, with the clear understanding that their elder daughter, who is financially successful, would contribute the mortgage payments as her part in this family arrangement. He went on to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who had verbally agreed to the arrangement, and then callously backed out, causing emotional distress to my vulnerable sister, who had been counting on her new home. When Samuel rose to present our side, his approach was methodical and devastating. "Your Honor, not only was there never any agreement, verbal or otherwise, but the plaintiffs actually committed forgery by signing my client's name to mortgage documents without her knowledge or consent." He presented the forged documents along with examples of my actual signature and a statement from a handwriting expert confirming the forgery. Judge Morrison's expression darkened as she examined the evidence. "Mr. Donovan, is your client aware that forgery is a felony in this state?" Donovan looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, my clients were operating under the good faith belief that their daughter would fulfill her family obligation once the process was underway." "That is not a legal defense for forgery," the judge noted sharply. The judge ordered mediation before proceeding further, but the session was a disaster. My parents refused to drop their demand that I pay the mortgage, and I refused to accept any responsibility for a commitment I had never made. We returned to court 2 weeks later for the continuation of the preliminary hearing. During the discovery phase, Samuel uncovered even more disturbing information. My parents had not only forged my signature on the mortgage documents, but had a history of using my personal information without consent. They had taken out student loans in my name during college, which explained the mysterious credit issues I had encountered in my early 20s. There were credit card applications, store accounts, and even a car loan that I had never authorized. This pattern of identity theft extended back years, a shocking betrayal that left me reeling. I had always assumed the credit problems were errors or mix-ups. It never occurred to me that my own parents were systematically using my identity for financial gain. Even more revealing were text messages between Amber and her friends that Samuel obtained through the discovery process. "Jessica owes us after all Mom and Dad did for her," she wrote to her friend Taylor. "Besides, she can afford it. She has that fancy job and never spends money on anything fun anyway." The depth of their entitlement and lack of respect for my autonomy became increasingly clear as more evidence came to light. My hurt began to transform into anger, a protective rage that helped me stand firm against their continued attempts at manipulation. Before the full trial, Samuel filed several motions, highlighting the forgery evidence and seeking summary judgment on our counterclaims. Judge Morrison signaled serious concerns about my parents' case, suggesting they should consider settling. Samuel presented them with a reasonable offer: drop all claims against me, acknowledge the forgery in writing, and agree to no contact for 6 months. In return, I would not pursue criminal charges for the identity theft and forgery. They rejected it outright. "They genuinely believe they are in the right," Samuel told me, sounding baffled. Their attorney has advised them to settle, but they refuse. The night before the trial, I received an unexpected call from Amber. For a moment, I hoped she had come to her senses and wanted to apologize. Instead, she launched into a practice speech about family loyalty and how I could fix everything by just agreeing to pay the mortgage. "Think about how good you would feel helping me get established," she wheedled. "I would be so grateful, Jess. We could be close again like when we were little." "We were never close," I replied the truth, finally spilling out. "You were the favorite, and I was the one expected to make sacrifices. Nothing has changed except that I am finally standing up for myself." "You are so selfish," she spat, dropping the sweet act instantly. "You will regret this when you have no family left." "I already regret having the family I was given," I said quietly and hung up. The courtroom was tense on the morning of the trial. I sat beside Samuel trying to project confidence despite my churning stomach. Across the aisle, my parents and Amber, huddled with their attorney, occasionally glancing in my direction, with expressions ranging from anger to performative sadness. Judge Morrison entered, and the proceedings began. My parents' case went first, with my father taking the stand to claim that there had been a clear understanding that I would pay the mortgage. Jessica agreed to this arrangement during a family discussion, he testified. She understood it was her contribution to helping her sister establish herself. "Can you provide any evidence of this agreement?" Judge Morrison asked. "It was a verbal agreement," my father replied. "A family commitment." When Samuel cross-examined him about the forged signature, my father's composure cracked. "We did what was necessary to secure the house," he snapped. "Jessica would have signed if she had not been so difficult." "So you admit to signing her name without permission?" Samuel pressed. "We did what any parents would do," he insisted, his face flushing with anger. My mother's testimony focused on emotional appeals. Tears flowed as she described how my abandonment had destroyed the family harmony. "All we wanted was for our daughters to support each other," she sobbed. "Jessica has always been the stable one. Is it so wrong to expect her to help her sister?" Samuel's cross-examination was precise. "Mrs. Wilson, did you at any point ask Jessica if she was willing to take on this financial obligation before proceeding with the house purchase?" "We knew she would want to help," my mother replied evasively. "That is not what I asked," Samuel persisted. "Did you explicitly ask her and receive her agreement before moving forward?" "No," my mother admitted reluctantly, "but it was implied." Amber's testimony was the most revealing. Under questioning from her parents' attorney, she portrayed herself as a victim of my jealousy and selfishness. "I was just trying to establish myself," she said, voice quavering for effect. "Jessica has always had everything together. I thought she would want to help me get started." During cross-examination, Samuel was direct. "Miss Wilson, do you currently have a job?" "I am between opportunities right now," Amber replied. "Have you ever held a job for longer than 6 months?" "My career path has been more creative and flexible," she said defensively. "How are you planning to contribute to the expenses of this house? Utilities, taxes, maintenance?" "My parents were going to help with that, until my wellness coaching business takes off," she admitted. So, to be clear, Samuel summarized, "You expected your sister to pay the mortgage, while your parents covered other expenses, and you contributed nothing." "When you say it like that, it sounds bad," Amber protested. "How would you say it?" Samuel asked. She had no answer. When my turn came to testify, I focused on facts rather than emotions. I detailed my independent financial history, the discovery of the forged documents, and the pattern of unequal treatment throughout our lives. "I never agreed to pay for my sister's mortgage," I stated clearly. "I was never even consulted before they purchased the house. The first I heard of it was when they presented me with mortgage documents and expected me to sign." I explained the impact the lawsuit had had on my professional reputation when I was served papers at work the emotional distress of being betrayed by my own family, and the financial damage caused by their previous identity theft. Samuel called several additional witnesses. My boss Jennifer testified about my work ethic and the professional damage caused by my parents' harassment. Michael spoke about witnessing the toll the situation had taken on my health and our relationship. Aunt Rebecca provided powerful testimony about the decades-long pattern of favoritism she had observed. With my permission, Dr. Wilson testified about the psychological impact of the situation, explaining how the lawsuit represented an escalation of a lifelong pattern of exploitation. Jessica has shown remarkable resilience, she told the court, but this betrayal by her parents has caused significant trauma that will require ongoing therapeutic support to resolve. In a desperate move, my parents' attorney tried to portray me as money-obsessed and callous toward my family's needs. The attempt fell flat against the mountain of evidence, showing the opposite, that I had been systematically taken advantage of by the people who should have protected me. In his closing argument, Samuel was direct and powerful. This case is not about a family disagreement. It is about forgery, identity theft, and harassment. The plaintiffs did not just ask their daughter to pay for a house she would never live in, they forged her signature on legal documents when she refused. They have shown a pattern of financial exploitation that extends back years. The counterclaims should be upheld, and the original lawsuit dismissed as the baseless harassment it clearly is. Judge Morrison took only 20 minutes to reach her decision, returning to the courtroom with a determined expression. This court finds in favor of the defendant Jessica Wilson on all counts, she announced. The plaintiff's lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the court finds merit in the counterclaims of forgery, identity theft, and harassment. She awarded me $120,000 for credit damage, legal fees, and emotional distress, a substantial sum that represented judicial recognition of the severity of my parents' actions. Judge Morrison was not finished. She looked directly at my parents as she delivered her final comments. The behavior exhibited by the plaintiffs in this case goes beyond poor judgment. It represents a fundamental breach of trust between parent and child. The court is particularly troubled by the pattern of identity theft and financial exploitation revealed during these proceedings. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, you have damaged your relationship with your daughter in ways this court cannot address. I strongly urge you to seek family counseling before any attempts at reconciliation. My parents sat in stunned silence as the verdict was delivered. They had been so certain of their righteousness, so convinced that the court would uphold their distorted view of family obligation, that they appeared unable to process their defeat. Amber was less restrained. In the hallway outside the courtroom, she broke down in tears loud enough for everyone to hear. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to live? This is so unfair. As Samuel guided me toward the exit, I heard my father's voice behind me. This is not over, Jessica. Families do not resolve things in courtrooms. I turned back one last time. You brought this to court, not me. I just finished it. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and grief. I had won by every legal measure. The judge had seen the truth and ruled accordingly. Yet I had also lost something irreplaceable, the illusion that my family, despite their flaws, ultimately had my best interests at heart. The weeks following the verdict were strangely quiet. My parents, perhaps on advice from their attorney, stopped their direct harassment. The incessant calls ceased. The inappropriate workplace visits ended. Even Amber's social media campaign tapered off as she faced the reality of her situation. I returned to work after my medical leave, grateful for Jennifer's understanding and the support of colleagues who never asked intrusive questions about my absence. Focusing on projects and deadlines provided a welcome distraction from the emotional aftermath of the trial. Michael and I resumed wedding planning this time, with clear boundaries against family interference. We chose a venue in another state, worked with vendors who had no connection to my family, and created password protections for all our arrangements. The process that should have been joyful was tinged with caution and defensive measures, a sad reminder of what the lawsuit had cost us. Despite the court order, my parents initially refused to pay the judgment. Samuel had to file liens against their assets, a process that brought another wave of accusations and blame from extended family members who did not understand or chose to ignore the facts of the case. Aunt Rebecca remained my steadfast ally, becoming more involved in my life in a maternal role my own mother had never truly filled. We had weekly dinners where she shared family stories I had never heard, filling in gaps in my understanding of the dynamics that had shaped my childhood. "Your father was always image-obsessed," she explained during one such dinner. "Having a creative daughter like Amber gave him something unique to brag about at the country club. Your achievements were more conventional, so he took them for granted." "And Mom?" I asked, still trying to understand how my own mother could have participated in such exploitation. "Margaret has always been a follower," Aunt Rebecca said gently. "She decided early in their marriage that supporting Harold's decisions was easier than forming her own opinions. I tried to talk to her about the favoritism years ago, but she just could not see it." As the months passed, I worked with Dr. Wilson to process my grief and establish healthier boundaries. "Family estrangement is sometimes portrayed as a failure," she told me. "But in cases of exploitation and abuse, it can be a necessary step toward healing." I struggled with the concept of possibly never reconciling with my parents. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that craved their approval, their love. Dr. Wilson helped me understand that this was normal. "You can acknowledge those feelings without acting on them," she explained. "Wanting parental love is deeply human. The question is whether reconnection would be healthy for you, and under what conditions." We developed a set of conditions that would need to be met before I would consider any contact: a full acknowledgement of their actions, a genuine apology without qualifications, evidence of therapeutic intervention to address their behavior, and respect for my ongoing boundaries. 4 months after the trial, I learned through Aunt Rebecca that my parents had been forced to sell their vacation property in Maine to pay the judgment and their legal fees. The house they had purchased for Amber had also been sold at a slight loss, due to the rushed nature of the sale. Amber, faced with the reality that neither I nor our parents could provide her dream house, was forced to find employment for the first time in her adult life. She took a job as a receptionist at a local spa, a position she deemed beneath her talents but that provided steady income. Their financial reality check seemed to trigger some soul-searching. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from my father. Unlike the formal legal letters or angry messages of the past, this one seemed genuinely reflective. "Jessica," he wrote, "these past months have forced me to reconsider many things. While I still believe family should support each other, I recognize that our approach was deeply flawed. The house situation was handled poorly. We should have discussed it with you, rather than presenting it as a fait accompli. I cannot change the past, but I hope someday we might find a way forward." It was not quite an apology, still containing hints of justification, but it represented a shift from his previous position of absolute righteousness. I did not respond immediately, taking time to process my feelings with Dr. Wilson's guidance. My mother reached out next, a tearful phone call that I allowed to go to voicemail. "Jessica, sweetheart, we miss you," her message said. "This separation is tearing me apart. Whatever mistakes we made, we are still your parents. Can we not find a way to be a family again?" Again, there was no real acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, just a desire to restore the status quo without addressing the underlying issues. I sent a brief email explaining my conditions for potential reconciliation, making it clear that sweeping the past under the rug was not an option. The most surprising development came from Amber. 7 months after the trial, she asked to meet for coffee. After careful consideration and discussion with Michael and Dr. Wilson, I agreed to a brief meeting in a public place. Amber looked different, more subdued than I had ever seen her. The designer clothes and perfect manicure were replaced by a simple outfit and practical short nails. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," she said after an awkward greeting. Working at the spa, I see all these women come in spending money they earned themselves, and I realized I have never experienced that. Never known what it feels like to buy something with money I actually worked for. She fidgeted with her coffee cup before continuing. I was angry at you for so long, for not giving me what I thought I deserved. But lately, I have been angry at Mom and Dad instead. For not preparing me for the real world. For making me believe I was entitled to things I had not earned. It was not a full apology, but it was an acknowledgement, the first real one I had received from any family member. I am not ready to forgive everything I told her honestly. But I appreciate you saying that. It means something. We parted with no promises of immediate reconciliation, but a tentative agreement to text occasionally, a small opening that might someday lead to a healthier relationship. As our wedding date approached, Michael and I had serious discussions about whether to invite my family. The pressure from extended relatives to put the past behind us for one day was intense. "This is your decision," Michael assured me. "I will support whatever you choose. But remember, this day is about us building our future, not appeasing people who have hurt you." In the end, I decided against inviting my parents and Amber. The risk of drama or disruption was too great, and the thought of spending my wedding day on edge, waiting for inappropriate comments or scenes, was unbearable. Instead, we created a celebration filled with people who genuinely supported us. Aunt Rebecca stood in, as my family representative, giving a touching speech about resilience and chosen family that brought tears to many eyes. Jennifer and colleagues from work-filled tables that might have held relatives. Michael's large, boisterous family enveloped me with genuine warmth that highlighted what healthy family dynamics could look like. There was sadness, of course. Walking down the aisle without my father taking photographs, without my mother celebrating, without the family I was born into, all carried a weight of grief for what should have been. But there was also profound joy in being surrounded by people who respected and valued me for who I truly was, not what I could provide. As Michael and I exchanged vows promising to support each other's growth, honor each other's boundaries, and build a partnership based on mutual respect, I felt a surge of determination. We would create a different kind of family together, one built on equality and genuine care rather than obligation and exploitation. The family I had lost had shown me exactly what I did not want. The family I was building would be shaped by those lessons, transformed into something healthier and more beautiful than what had come before. 1 year after the trial, I stood on the balcony of our new home, a modest but comfortable townhouse that Michael and I had purchased together. The morning sun cast a warm glow over our small garden, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. The scene was peaceful, ordinary even, but to me it represented an extraordinary transformation. A year earlier, I had been embroiled in a lawsuit with my own parents, facing their attempt to saddle me with a mortgage for my sister's house. Now I was building a life based on mutual respect and genuine love, free from the manipulation and exploitation that had defined my family relationships for so long. The journey had not been easy. Even with the legal battle resolved, the emotional aftermath continued to unfold in unexpected ways. There were nights when I woke from dreams, where I was still trying to please my parents, still seeking their approval. There were moments when a song or scent would trigger memories of happier family times, leaving me with a complicated mix of longing and relief. Dr. Wilson helped me understand that these feelings were not signs of weakness or regression. Grief for the family you deserved but never had is a natural part of the healing process, she explained. You can acknowledge that grief without returning to unhealthy patterns. My professional life flourished in ways that surprised me. Without the constant drain of family emergencies and financial demands, I had more energy and focus for my career. Jennifer recommended me for a senior consultant position that came with increased responsibility and a significant salary increase. You have always had the skills, she told me during my performance review, but now you have the bandwidth to fully utilize them. Michael and I established holiday traditions that honored authenticity over obligation. For Thanksgiving, we hosted a family of choice dinner, inviting friends who for various reasons were not spending the holiday with biological relatives. Christmas became a time for volunteering at the local shelter, before exchanging thoughtful, modest gifts that represented genuine consideration rather than obligation or status. The freedom from seeking parental approval affected me in subtle but profound ways. I found myself making decisions based on my own values and desires, rather than anticipating criticism or judgment. I cut my hair short after years of maintaining the long style my mother preferred. I took a pottery class despite my father's dismissal of artistic pursuits as impractical hobbies. These might seem like small acts of independence, but they represented a fundamental shift in how I viewed myself and my agency in the world. Inspired by my own experience, I joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic or toxic parents. Sharing my story and hearing others' similar experiences helped normalize what I had been through and provided a community of understanding that my childhood had lacked. Eventually, I began co-facilitating workshops on setting healthy family boundaries, turning my painful experience into a resource that could help others navigate similar situations. "Your story has given me courage," one participant told me, after sharing her own experience of financial exploitation by parents. "I always thought I was alone in this." Meanwhile, the dynamics in my estranged family continued to evolve. Amber's journey was perhaps the most surprising. Without our parents' financial support, and with the reality of having to support herself, she experienced what she later described as growing up at 29. Her job at the spa evolved from a stopgap measure to a career path when she discovered an aptitude for business operations. The owner recognized her organizational skills when actually applied and promoted her to assistant manager. For the first time, Amber was earning recognition based on genuine effort rather than parental favoritism. 6 months into her new role, she reached out again, this time with a more substantial acknowledgement of the past. "I have been thinking about how differently we were treated growing up," she wrote in an email. "I always thought I was the lucky one getting whatever I wanted without having to work for it. Now I realize Mom and Dad did me no favors. You learned how to function in the real world. I'm just starting to figure it out at 30. We began meeting monthly for coffee, our conversations gradually becoming more honest and less guarded. There was no instant sisterly bond, no dramatic reconciliation, but rather a slow building of a new relationship based on who we were as adults, rather than the roles we had been assigned as children. "I was jealous of you," she admitted during one such meeting. "Not just of your success, but of your independence. You never seemed to need anyone's approval the way I did. I wanted it just as badly," I confessed. "I just learned early that I was not going to get it, no matter what I did." These conversations, difficult as they sometimes were, helped us both understand the family system that had shaped us. Amber began to see how she had been weaponized against me, turned into the standard I could never meet. I began to recognize that while she had been materially favored, she had also been stunted by our parents' excessive involvement in her life. My parents' evolution was more complicated. As they faced health challenges, the reality of aging without their more responsible daughter's support began to sink in. My father experienced chest pains that required hospitalization, a frightening episode that prompted my mother to reach out with what seemed like genuine regret. "I know we have no right to ask anything of you," she said in a voicemail that caught me off guard with its lack of manipulation. "But your father had a health scare, and it has made us both reconsider many things. If you would be willing to talk even briefly, we would be grateful." After consultation with Dr. Wilson and discussion with Michael, I responded with a carefully worded email. I expressed appropriate concern for my father's health, but maintained my boundary that any potential reconciliation would require acknowledgement of past behavior and evidence of genuine change. To my surprise, their response was not the immediate denial or justification I had come to expect. "We have been seeing a family therapist," my mother wrote back. "It is a long process, and we have much to learn, but we are trying to understand where things went wrong. Your boundaries are respected." This tentative exchange opened the door to what Dr. Wilson called compassionate distance, a stance that acknowledged our connection without ignoring the harm that had been done. I maintained firm boundaries while allowing for the possibility of a different kind of relationship in the future. When Michael and I discovered I was pregnant 5 months after our first anniversary, we faced the complicated question of grandparent involvement. The joy of expecting our first child was tempered by the need to protect our growing family from the dysfunctional patterns of the past. "I do not want our child to experience the favoritism and manipulation I grew up with," I told Michael, as we discussed how to handle the news with my family. "But I also do not want to make decisions based purely on fear or revenge." Together with Dr. Wilson, we developed a framework for limited conditional contact that prioritized our child's well-being, while allowing for the possibility of healthy grandparent relationships if my parents could demonstrate consistent change. I wrote a letter to my parents, outlining these conditions. Clearly, no unannounced visits, no undermining our parental decisions, no financial manipulation, no comparing our child to other grandchildren, and mandatory respect for ordained boundaries. The letter was both an olive branch and a clear statement that the past patterns would not be tolerated in the next generation. "We are creating our own family now," I wrote in conclusion. "One based on equality, respect, and genuine support. You are welcome to be part of that family if you can honor these values. The choice is yours." Their response, a handwritten letter that acknowledged my conditions without defensiveness, suggested they had indeed been doing the therapeutic work they claimed. It was not a perfect resolution nor a guarantee of future harmony, but it was a step toward a more honest relationship than we had ever had before. As I approach the birth of our child, I find myself reflecting on the complex journey that brought me here. 2 years ago, I was enmeshed in a family system that demanded everything and gave little in return. Today, I am building a new kind of family, one rooted in mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation and exploitation. The lawsuit painful, as it was forced a reckoning that might never have happened otherwise. In asking me to pay for my sister's mortgage, my parents unwittingly revealed the true nature of our relationship and gave me the opportunity to choose a different path. I have learned that family is not just about biological connection or shared history. It is about how we treat each other daily, the respect we show for each other's autonomy, and the love we express, not through grand gestures, but through consistent support and genuine care. As I place my hand on my growing belly, feeling the first flutters of movement from the new life within, I make a silent promise. This child will know they are valued for who they are, not what they can provide. They will understand that love does not come with strings attached. They will learn that boundaries are not selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. The journey from daughter to mother has taught me that sometimes we must break unhealthy cycles to create space for something better to grow. By refusing to pay my sister's mortgage, I was not just protecting my financial future, I was claiming my right to be treated with dignity and respect, a lesson I will pass on to my child, and hopefully to generations beyond. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who expected too much from you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that standing up for yourself is not selfish, but necessary for your well-being. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content about healing from family trauma and building healthier relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve respect and fair treatment even from family. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and clarity in your own path toward healthy boundaries.